Thank you all for coming. Really grateful to have you all here in the room, and for those who are joining virtually. My name's Jim Mitre. I'm the director of the International Security and Defense Policy Program here at the RAND Corporation, and I'm overjoyed to share the stage today with Ms. Margie Palmieri, who is the Department of Defense's inaugural Deputy Chief Digital and AI Officer. Now, Margie started off as a Presidential Management Fellow in the Navy, having graduated from Rutgers University with an undergraduate and a master's degree. Spent most of her career in the Navy at the intersection of technology and operations. Spent some time over at the Joint Staff with the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff as his Director of the Chairman's Action Group, and then went back to the Navy to be the Director for Integrated Fires before the Deputy Secretary plucked her out of there and brought her over to take the reins of CDAO along with Dr. Craig Martel. Before we get rolling on the discussion here, just want to lay out a few admin notes. First off, this meeting is being recorded. Second, the agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to have a little bit of a Q&A here, and then we're going to open it up for broader Q&A. If you've got questions in the room, please just come to the mic. If you're online, you'll get a link in a minute if it hasn't come through already for Slido, and just submit questions there. We'll get to as many as we can within the time that we have available. Please state your name and affiliation before providing your question, okay? That's all there is to it. Terrific. Margie, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, excellent. Well, so wanted to start the conversation with a little bit of an understanding on the formation of the CDAO. So just to review the bidding here a little bit, in 2021, when the Deputy Secretary laid out her first memo calling for the creation of CDAO, she mentioned that actually the department had been making some really important progress on data analytics and AI with some of the individual component organizations, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, the Chief Data Officer, the Advanta team within the Undersecretary of Defense for Comptroller, Defense Digital Service, and then Project Maven. And all of those, Project Maven in part, not in total, were brought together in a merger that creates CDAO. And the logic of the case was that while there had been good progress, there'd be value in bringing them together for greater alignment and synchronization of these efforts. I'm curious, how's the merger going a year into it? Do you feel like there's a culture clash, different kind of communities coming together here? Do you feel like there's a lot of kindred spirits kind of all rowing in the same direction? Give us a little bit in terms of how the merger is coming about.
Yeah, no. So we really took the last year to think through how do we accomplish the mission of the CDAO, which is to accelerate DoD's adoption of data, analytics, and AI from the boardroom to the battlefield. And each of those component pieces, as you said, came with their own culture, came with their own lessons learned, best practices, and insights on, what was the challenge in DoD and what were potential ways to go after it. And as we, maybe some would say we took too long. I think we appropriately learned from those experiences in each of those groups, and have now put together a CDAO organization that really reflects a blend of those groups and talents and cultures. When we've done a couple cultural surveys, one of the things that has been consistent across all of them is that our people are committed to the mission. They want to bring industry best practices to DoD. They want to do it with urgency and speed and agility. And they're really passionate about solving DoD's problems through a technical lens. And so for all of the cultural differences we have, that piece really unites us, and everyone's really engaged. And when we make a call for, hey, we've got a problem out there and want to solve it, everyone kind of turns to. And it's allowed us to bring together some pretty unique teams that cut across those divisions.
That's terrific.
Yeah, it's gelling, and we're feeling good, and we've got the kind of the vision and the objectives and priorities, I think, to bring folks together.
That's excellent. Can you elaborate just a little bit on the Defense Digital Service team in particular? Because they're a little bit different even than the other ones, that they were already a collection of individuals on a couple of year detail to the Department of Defense with deep technological expertise and background. So not the traditional DoD types to begin with. Yeah. How are they being integrated in, and how's DDS in the CDAO construct working out?
Yeah, I'll step backwards one step to go forward on that one. So backwards one step is, so DDS, first of the digital art organizations you mentioned, they're like a 2015 stand-up. Jake was 2018, CDAO 2020, Advanta somewhere in between all those. But each one of those elements had done work to understand how to really do digital transformation inside of DoD. And there are a bunch of best practices out there in industry, but everyone has to apply it to their culture and their experience and their mission. And CDAO, our main challenge is really now about scale. And so in each of those organizations, when they were founded, they took on use cases or smaller scale problems to apply best practices in digital transformation to show DoD how it could advance its capabilities in the digital space and the way they design. I would call it kind of how they develop products. We've really talked a lot about this question of how do you scale DDS? Because as they came in, like you said, incredible talent, incredible commitment to the mission, just this amazing passion to serve our service members and make sure that the lives of those in DoD is improved. But it was a project by project based approach. And so we really started thinking about what scale would look like. And we went through all the components of CDAO and kind of set them on a path. We can talk about AI ML later, about data and analytics and data quality. For DDS, it's really around how we do agile product development. The key skill that when we looked across all their different projects that they did, the one thing that they were doing, where they were bringing this agile product development focus to the way they solve problems. And DoD does program management. We do, here's your system. I'm going to deliver you this technology. I'll train you on it and then I'll hand it over. DDS comes in, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Let me talk to the users, get an understanding of the ground truth on what that looks like, and then start the design process in a very product-focused way. And so long story, but as we start to incorporate them more, we're looking at really how do we apply them as kind of the team that jumps in, provides that hands-on experience, and then how do we as CDAO, from an enterprise perspective, provide the tools and training resources necessary for organizations to be able to learn more and do more, either before they get there or after they have left. And then who are the industry partners that could help? Because DDS is a 30 or so workforce, and we'll need more capacity in this area. So how do we partner with industry to do that more broadly?
Okay, no, that's excellent. Yeah, I mean, in terms of like critical skill sets in the digital sphere, people often talk about data engineers, data scientists, but product management is an important skill set, obviously out in the industry, but largely unappreciated within the department. Yeah. So that makes a lot of good sense. Okay, let's talk about you and Dr. Martel for a second. CDAO management. The department for the last decade has been trying to bring in tech experts into senior management positions within the Department of Defense, folks from Silicon Valley and elsewhere. And it's been experimenting essentially with different models on how to bring them in. In many cases, once they arrive at the Department of Defense, there's a steep learning curve to understand the physics of that unique environment. And so in this specific case, when the Deputy Secretary was looking to create the management team for CDAO, you two were thought of as a pair. And so Dr. Martel, previously the head of machine learning over at Lyft, was brought in large part because he's at the forefront of where industry is on machine learning and AI. And you were brought in large part because you understand how the department works, or how to move the levers and affect change within it. I'd love to get a sense in terms of how that model is working, how that pairing is, anything you can share about your personal experience with working with Craig.
Yeah, no, I mean, the deputy, whoever came up with this pairing was absolutely brilliant. It has been an amazingly productive relationship. One is because Craig, who he is, and he's strategy focused. He's committed to doing the right thing. He's open to dissenting opinions and other ideas. He came in recognizing he had a lot to learn. And it wasn't like, I know what's best because I came from industry. It was really around, hey, I have a general theory of the case. How do we make it work? And so he's been really open to feedback and kind of how do you make this work in the DoD context? And so we've had a lot of conversations, him and me, but also with our entire leadership team around, in industry, it would work this way. In government, can't quite work that way, but how can we get the same outcome, and how can we create, incentives in government are very, very different than they can be in industry in some cases. And so how do you align those? And it's actually, I think, contributed to the speed at which CDAO has been able to move forward and deliver actual capability wins in its first year, in addition to just standing up the organization. But I think we've done a lot in a couple key areas on delivering real results and not just org design.
Okay, excellent, very good. Now let's talk for a second about how you two as a team are interfacing with your counterparts at the four-star level within the department. Again, part of the logic for creating CDAO was to have somebody who cares deeply about data and AI as their main job, sitting at forums like the Deputies Management Actions Group, where you've got the four stars around the table trying to determine how the department is going to manage its $800 billion budget every year. That didn't exist in the past, right? And so CDAO is at the stature of like the CIO, counterparts with the four stars in the services and the commands, the other undersecretaries. How have you been received? Is there a little bit of like, hey, this is the new kid on the block, we don't know what to make of them, they have to demonstrate themselves? Is there a lot of time educating them on technical issues with data and AI? Anything you can share about that experience of sitting at the table and being a part of those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, Craig said that when he came in from industry, he expected he would have to do a lot of education about the importance of data and analytics. And what he found was the DoD had already been convinced of that. It was really the question of what's the best way to move forward. In the services, in the combatant commands, they all have efforts in this space. And so, like I said, over the last 5 years or so, DoD has done an incredible kind of groundwork on how to make this work. The question now is how to scale it and how to apply new and emerging things like what we're seeing with generative AI. And so Craig's expertise there has been really helpful because he can understand, okay, what's real, what's not real, and then back to your pairing piece, understanding, how do we apply resources and how do we ask for resources in this space in a way where we can execute, with confidence, and it's not just kind of this vision. So it's actually been really, really great. Inside the CDAO mission functions is this expectation for us to be a demanding customer. And the first time I heard that, I was like, what does that mean, demanding customer? And it was explained to me by someone we're both familiar with, that we are expected to work with the other parts of DoD to remove barriers to data AI adoption if we can't do it ourselves. And that peer relationship between us and the other direct reports to the DSD and the SecDef, both within the building and then outside, with the combatant commands and some of the other agencies, has been super helpful. And we can use the CDAO Council, our governing board, to work through those issues. And then if we can't come to agreement, we can elevate. But so far, without a doubt, every new organization has to prove itself, but most people have been really open to inviting us in and having conversations. And we've been trying to support them as much as possible through the work that we're doing.
Okay, no, that's really encouraging. Can I pull the thread just a little bit on one of the points you made there, in that at the four-star level, there seems to be a lot of acceptance to the importance of data and AI, and the question is more on implementation. There's a perception by many, I'll put myself in this camp a bit, that the Department of Defense is still very hardware centric, and it thinks about large weapon systems and platforms, less so about software and some of the intangibles like data and AI when it's thinking about its future force design and things of that nature. Do you feel like the cultural shift is happening and that there's a recognition about the importance of software, not just that this is something that we need to do, but that the processes and ways in which the department is actually trying to build its future force is starting to move along? What can you say about the cultural shift here?
So I will say without a doubt, in the combatant commands, what we see is a incredible focus on data analytics, AI software for decision support. I think if you looked at every single combatant command we have, there's some initiative that they are leading themselves in that space in some way, because it's so critical to the mission. I'd also say that inside the building for the management of DoD, there are multiple offices from from CAPE to policy to A&S, R&E, that are really driving their decision-making processes through the lens of data and analytics. Some of that software, a lot of them use the Advanta platform, which is something that CDAO sponsors, comes with analytic tools so users can kind of create their own. Others are using external platforms, but this idea that leaders want to use data and analytics more to drive their decision making is absolutely gaining momentum, and starting to kind of take over from a management perspective, and then from an operational decision making perspective. I think platforms still exist. I think in the platform world, probably there are definitely pockets throughout the services that are doing more to take a software and data-centric approach to the capabilities that ride on those platforms. And I think as we work towards Jazzy II and the pieces there, we'll see that even more.
Okay, very good,
Yeah.
very good. You mentioned earlier on CDAO's mission, which is to restate for the audience here, it's to accelerate DoD's adoption of data analytics and AI to generate decision advantage from the boardroom to the battlefield. I find this a really interesting mission for a couple of reasons. In part, it's about adoption. It's not about trying to create new technologies, but how you adopt them at scale. And then two, it's a pretty broad scope to do it enterprise-wide, right? Back office functions, the business of defense to include right in the middle of a high-intensity conflict, right? How you think about applying things there. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of how the department's doing on this journey to become more data-driven and AI-enabled? Where are you on executing that mission?
Yeah, I think there's two facets to this. One is one of the things Craig brought to CDAO was this digital hierarchy of needs. So a lot of people love to jump to the AI space and start talking about the different algorithms. But we've got kind of this pyramid of foundational enablers. And these are things like we have to have the talent both in the digital space and in the leadership space that understands how to apply data analytics and AI to their mission set and how to really build those capabilities or lead the development of them effectively. We also need the acquisition processes that are going to allow us to acquire these technologies because they're not platforms or industrial capabilities traditionally. Next level of the hierarchy needs is data quality. And so before you start building any analytics, you want to make sure you've got access to the right data and it's of sufficient quality to make a decision. Mm-hmm. The analytic piece is next, and then the AI aspect is on top of that, really just where you want to apply the right set of algorithms or dashboards or analytics to your problem set. So with that kind of construct, we've been able to focus our efforts. And we've got 5 priority areas that are kind of reflective of the hierarchy of needs and how we're applying them. And so number one is data quality. So it is foundational to everything we do, whether it's just really to understand how we count things in the department and how we integrate things in the department, all the way up to how do we predict what trends might be coming next. We've got to have the foundation of data quality and the access to it to make that possible. The next one is this AI/ML scaffolding. So because of scale, because our mission is scale, we don't want to create AI from the CDAO. We'll talk about the 2 applications we have where we're looking at that. But in general, we want the different elements of the department across the department to be able to create AI/ML algorithms and apply them to their mission wherever they want to. But we want them to do it responsibly, and we want to make sure that the AI that we are fielding has justified confidence. So it's going to do what it's supposed to do. It's not going to do what it's not supposed to do, and our operators know how to use it in the right way. And so there are pieces around that, whether it's test and evaluation or criteria for how you train and retrain, or how you train and retrain the algorithm, or train and retrain the operator, or how they work together. There are pieces around that we will set from CDAO to kind of guide the department in the development of responsible AI. Third priority is talent management, so digital talent management. There are 12 work roles inside of the cyber workforce framework that are related to data analytics and AI. CDAO recently got assigned as the functional community manager of those, which means we will identify the people and the billets across the department, set up training and mentorship, a talent pipeline for them to come in and find jobs outside once they decide to leave government. And so those pieces, you can see a direct mapping to the hierarchy needs. The other 2 priorities we have are the application of data analytics and AI. One is in the business performance space. So DepSecDef is very interested in making sure we have data analytics to drive decision-making in the management of the department. And so through the strategic management plan and the National Defense Strategy Implementation Plan, we're bringing data and metrics and analytics to help support seniors in the execution or implementation of those. The other one is Jazzy II. So the ability to integrate data across the services, across the combatant commands, vertically and horizontally, the ability to have a variety of industry partners write applications in that space in support of combatant command requirements, and then to figure those things out through experimentation. And we run the Global Information Dominance Experiment Series. And so those pieces are kind of how we're pulling that together. And they've really given us the focus to take that universe of potential problems and really put in place the core elements that we think will help the department scale adoption.
Terrific. Okay.
That was a lot.
No, that was fantastic, because honestly, you've laid out a roadmap for the rest of our Q&A here. Yeah. So no, let's delve into kind of a couple of those pieces there in a little more depth before opening it up for a broader Q&A. So let's start with data. You outlined elements of the tech stack essentially, right? There's infrastructure, there's the data piece, there's analytics, AI on top. You and Craig have both been quite public talking about the importance of the data layer, given where the department is right now at this moment in time on its journey, and really trying to make investments there. You're not alone in that the Deputy Secretary, in support with the Chief Data Officer, Dave Spurk, had put out a set of data decrees, right? That really trying to create a sea change in terms of the department's approach to managing data, make sure that's more accessible, it's not locked into legacy systems, not stovepiped, et cetera. How is that moving along, right? Outside of just CDAO, are you seeing the department's shift in data coming about? Are people taking the data decree seriously? What can you say about the data layer in general, but the data effort across the department more broadly?
Yeah, we see a really professionalization of the data officers across the department with increasing maturity. The more and more we work the different use cases. The best way to approach data quality is from a mission lens. And so to go out there and just say, hey, we're going to pick a random set of data sources and we're going to start to improve the quality and access of those sources doesn't allow you to demonstrate the power. And so whether it's through Advanta or through Jazzy II, we have a prioritized list of data sources that are directly mapped to user use cases. And we can say, if you don't provide this data, we will be unable to provide this commander or decision maker the ability to make the following decision in the way that they need to. And so what we're seeing is that is usually is a compelling case for people to get on board and say, okay, sure, I'll write an API or I'll give you at least a hardwired data push in some way. Without a doubt, we want to move towards more of a data mesh concept for the department where data is treated as a product, has product owners and products have customers. And so we're probably a few years away from really maturing to that level. We're still pretty system centric, but in the key areas, we're starting to see data providers much more curious about, well, why do you want to use that data? How are you going to use it? And then how do we actually create the system connections that allow that data to be moved across the enterprise? So actually, really good maturity. I think we have a while to go before it's totally fluid. But the use cases really drive folks forward, I think.
Okay, no, that's excellent. If we delve just a little bit more on Advanta.
Yeah.
I feel like this is one of the least well understood success stories in terms of the department's approach to data, because Advanta came about in a relatively data inhospitable environment. And so the work that y'all have been doing there is just really tremendous. And it seems like the demand for Advanta far exceeds supply of labor and data engineers, people able to do things. How's it going with Advanta? Do you have a sense in terms of where it might go, right? In terms of what you're trying to do with Advanta these days. Yeah,
I mean, Greg Little, who is our deputy CDAO that started Advanta back in the comptroller shop, and his team, Nick Lanham, is kind of just the brains behind it, behind the platform side and all of their support. They started, I describe it as kind of a platform response to audit or a platform response to crisis. So the first crisis was audit. We can, inauditable, can we put in audit data? Next thing that happened was COVID. Well, we have to account for all these supplies and we have to procure these supplies. We got this database, let's throw in all the COVID info. And then the Afghan NEO happened. And it's like, well, we track these planes and things. And so let's put that data in there. And then Ukraine happened. And okay, well, where are the weapons? And so, and in the meantime, as they've built out their customer segments, other people have caught on, and the early adopters have said, well, can we put, readiness data in there? And can we put, sexual assault and prevention data in there? And, what does it look like for us to take advantage of this platform as an enterprise capability instead of just a financial capability. And it's really grown. I think I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but we have an incredible user base that's growing every day. The number of use cases that they support is amazing. I think as we look to scale the platform, there's a couple things that we want to do. Right now, we want to find a way to invite more industry partners to come in and start to be able to provide visualization and analytics inside of that platform. The number one value of that platform is its ability to provide access to DoD data, agnostic of where the source is. It's a great way to integrate data and find it together. We will increase our pace and scale if we can start to invite more industry providers in there to link up with customers and start to not just rely on the CDAO team to support development, but to be able to do that with industry. I think the other pieces inside of Advanta are the tools to start AI/ML development. And as we think about this AI scaffolding piece, linking that initiative up with Advanta and making sure that we can use that data and the tools inside of Advanta to now expand that into a broader AI/ML scaffolding capability in conjunction with industry developing AI/ML. So I think you'll just see Advanta become more of a foundation for DoD data and analytics. You'll have a core set of tools for the citizen data scientists and others, and then we hope to make that much more applicable more broadly across the broader DoD customer base.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about the warfight aspect of the business here. So Jazzy II, Joint All-Domain Command and Control. One of the things that's always amused me about how the Department of Defense works is that when you do good work, you're rewarded with more good work. And it didn't take too long for the Secretary and the Deputy to look to CDAO and hand over the Jazzy II portfolio in large part. So clearly y'all are doing something right to inherit that mission. What can you say about how the Jazzy II effort is going? And you mentioned GUIDE a little bit earlier too. I know right now we're in the middle of a GUIDE experiment, which is pretty exciting, the Global Information Dominance Experiments, which CDAO picked up from Northcom. How's GUIDE moving along? How's Jazzy II going? Give us an update on where you are there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came from Navy and had kind of done some Navy Jazzy II stuff before coming to DoD. We've taken Jazzy II to the DMAG, as you said, the deputy and the vice chairman chair with all the department reps twice now. And when the deputy asked us to really work on the data integration aspect of Jazzy II and the decision advantage aspect of Jazzy II, the first thing we had to do is find out what work was already going on, because we knew we weren't starting from scratch. And we went to the COCOMs, to the services, also to OSD R&E, OSD A&S, CAPE. There's been Joint Staff, J6, J7, as well as I think I said the COCOMs already. There's an amazing amount of work in the department going on Jazzy II. And I think historically, the messaging has been that we are off track, the services don't work together, therefore we can't fully realize Jazzy II. We found completely the opposite. Jazzy II has been talked about as like this thing we buy and this thing in the future. And it's actually neither. The department in its various components has been developing and delivering and iterating on Jazzy II, over time, and continues to today through not just GUIDE, but other types of experiments. And it's not this single thing we're going to buy that makes everything better. So think of Jazzy II as a verb, Joint All-Domain Command and Control. Now it is combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control because we're going to do it with allies and partners. It's a verb. We command and control as an organization. And we've been involving C2 forever, right? C2 continually evolves, and so will Jazzy II. So as we think about that, the real gap that we saw in the different efforts that were happening was most efforts are designed to bring data in to support a decision maker for a specific use case. So best practice, right? There's a function that has to happen or a decision that has to take place, and you develop the capability in order to support that function. The challenge was no one was thinking about how to take that insight out of that application stack or out of that specific mission context and share it. And really, as we evolve this concept or this warfighting function of Jazzy II, our ability to command and control outside of just the domain stovepipes and do it more broadly is going to start to change our C2 concepts and workflows. And so getting data out is as important as getting data in. So the CDAO is working on a data integration layer designed to provide data and share data across the enterprise, really through a series of data mesh services. In industry, they do this all the time. Doing it in DoD, specialized context. I mean, we have distributed, disconnected, nodes at the tactical edge, but none of what we are building would be a surprise to anybody coming in from industry. And in fact, we've been able to get some really incredible minds from industry that are just fascinated by this problem set. This is the best part of DoD, right? Like we have really hard problems, but they've been able to bring their knowledge to this problem set. And we through Guide every 90 days do another increment of data integration, and then partnered with the various different COCOMs work on their workflows, because you could put the best tech around this problem set that we have, but if we actually didn't change the way we work, it's great to do something electronically, but if you put it in a PowerPoint slide and then brief it for 90 minutes, it's not going to have this intersect. So the Guide series allows us to match up those workflows with the technology, and then we take a stab at what the next lessons and iteration are every 90 days. Excellent.
All right. Well, so you hit on digital talent, and so let's talk about that a little bit more depth here. Arguably, CDAO's most important resource is its people, and in particular, those with some digital talent. So I'd love to understand a little bit in terms of like training the existing workforce and building them up, as well as the point you just made about attracting people from industry that come because the Department of Defense has a fantastic mission they want to get behind. Can you talk a little bit about how those two things are going?
Yeah. First of all, we inherited amazing people. I always joke, when you're in the service, going to OSD is like the dark side, because, they do oversight, and we actually get to build things, which is incredible. And our feeder organizations had oversight over data policy, acquisition authority, technical talent, and real capability in the form of Advanta and other things. Jake had built a few things. And we were really well positioned to start executing on some of these hard problems that the deputy threw our way. I think that mix of technical talent and an understanding of mission outcome has been, outcome-focused metrics has been one of the key things where we bring folks in and we're like, hey, you're not just here to build anything. We want to take that product management mindset and make sure that we're building the right thing, and we're doing it, in a way that is measurable, metrics-based, and going to deliver on an outcome. But really haven't had to do a ton of training of our current workforce. I think most of them had kind of, come through or had been exposed to DoD in new ways. For the folks that come in from industry, a lot of it is, just like over beer conversations around like, yeah, this is how it is, or this we can change, and this is a constraint. And, we can't just go out and find an industry partner we like and start working with them. Like there's a contracts and acquisition process. Now we've got fantastic acquisition vehicles that are, much more agile in the AI space than in the past. And so we can do that much more rapidly. I think the big thing for us is going to be thinking through the new business models around how we partner government and industry in this space, because it is so different. But we've actually seen effect for the director for digital services. We had a director move on and did a open recruitment action, had over 150 people apply. Wow. And so just going through resumes, we're like, well, this one's good for that, but we have these other positions and these people are good. And yeah, so usually I think that partnership between an existing government person and an industry person, as we worked at Jazzy II, we've paired up some, people with government knowledge with tech knowledge, and that we've kind of copied that model as we go through.
Well, I spent most of my career in the dark side.
That's right, I know.
So, but your point about how CDAO is unique is really interesting and important, because it is in part an undersecretary in that it provides guidance and issues memos, but then it's also sort of like a defense agency in field activity, that it builds things and does things in the real world. It's rare to get those all together in one outfit. So that's fascinating in terms of how the workforce is affected by that. Good. Well, I'm going to hit two more questions, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. One is on a hot topic on everybody's mind these days, generative AI. So last fall, there was a unveiling of a large number of large language models, right? like OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Cloud, et cetera, caught a lot of us by surprise, myself included, just in terms of the potential for these capabilities. They have incredible opportunities and benefits that you could seize with them, but they also create some new risks and some new challenges to national security. I wonder if we can take each of those in turn. From an opportunities perspective, CDAO has been exploring that space, right? And trying to think about how we can apply generative AI, large language models, foundation models in certain cases to the defense environment. Can you talk a little about some of the use cases y'all are exploring or what you're trying to do there? And then we'll come back and talk about the risks.
Yeah, sure. You know, I think there's kind of both ends of the spectrum that you hear most often, to your point, which is, you know, these things are going to bring massive benefit to the world, or, you know, they're going to bring massive destruction to the world. Maybe just a foundation before we get into the use cases, because the way we think about AI, the way we think AI is it really is use case based. So even in these generative AI models, they're not the solution for every use case. And so just like you see, you know, in the commercial world, in DoD, we have computer vision to look for object detection and tracking. We have natural language processing to look through policy documents and, you know, find correlations. We have other types of ML algorithms for predictive maintenance. And so generative AI is no different. There are going to be use cases that it's really, really good for, and there are going to be use cases it's not good for. What we found is there's not enough attention being paid to the potential downsides of generative AI, specifically hallucination. This is a huge problem for DoD, and it really matters for us and how we apply that. And so we're looking to work more closely with industry on these types of downsides and not just hand wave them away. So to do that, we are experimenting with, you know, different generative AI models. Most recently in Guide, we have had about 5 different models. Really just to test out, you know, how do they work? Can we train them on DoD data or tune them on DoD data? How do our users interact with them? And then what metrics do we want to come up with based off of what we were seeing to facilitate evaluation of these tools? Because there aren't really great evaluation metrics for generative AI yet. And everything that DoD fields in the technology space has some sort of understanding of how well it works. And AI, and generative AI included, are no different. And so we want to make sure that we have the ability to understand its capability and know when it's going to be effective and when it's not going to be effective. DoD's been doing AI for 60 years, driving AI in some cases, and the generative AI piece is no different. It's going to change the way we interact with our machines, without a doubt, but it's also going to follow along how we test and train and deploy as well.
Okay, excellent. And then can we go a little bit deeper on the risks?
Yeah.
So one of the concerns that many have, again, myself included, is that these capabilities potentially lower the barrier for non-experts to be able to get access to certain information that might help them build things like biological weapons, right? Or that where this technology is going, it could lead to general artificial intelligence, which could have significant implications, potentially impacting the military balance in novel ways that we haven't really yet thought of. I wonder if you could talk a little bit in terms of how are you all even thinking about the national security risks here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think this goes to, you know, the way we government, you know, DoD work with industry and academia on not hand waving the potential risks. I think there's what we see from industry sometimes is a lot of, there's so much benefit here, just do it. And in the DoD space, it's, yeah, so what are we going to do about hallucination? What are we going to do about how we actually train users on how to use these effectively? Because if it hasn't seen it, especially in a classified context, if it hasn't seen a certain training data set, it may not provide to you the right recommendation. And then how do we train our users? Like, that's the big thing, right? Every operational system we deploy into the field, we train the users on how to use it. It's a key aspect of delivery of capability in DoD. And AI is going to be no different. And so in order to be able to train someone on how to use it, you have to know what it's good at and what it's not good at, and when it is appropriate to use. And so as we think through both the scaffolding pieces and the deployment pieces, making sure that that's part of the conversation. We don't expect to centralize that in CDAO, but making sure that others are thinking through that is really important.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, and so CDAO at a year.
Yeah.
I'm curious in terms of how you think about defining success for the CDAO experiment. Congress has invested a lot in terms of resources the department has, to include in the predecessor organizations as well, right? So there's been a lot of attention, focus put on this, trying to help the department get on the right side of the data and AI landscape. How do you all think about what success is and whether or not you're doing a good job?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's the feedback we get from our customers. And so from the deputy secretary level, knowing that she and the SecDef are able to make better decisions based off of access to data, better understanding of that data that they're getting presented with, because analytics or AI has made sense of it, and accelerating the speed and continuity with which they can keep pace on department operations. And so one of the things we're doing inside of business performance is a pulse dashboard, which takes the key metrics from across the department, attaches the data that feed those metrics so that the deputy and the SecDef can see at any time where they're doing on one of their key initiatives. Mm-hmm. That's also helping us refine how we think about how we measure things, which is really fantastic. And so if we see better decision support, that is the key for us. Same thing with on the warfighting side with the COCOMs and others, as we start to see, as we have recently at a Distinguished Visitor Day at CENTCOM for their Dragon Falcon Oasis, and at the 18th Airborne Corps, who's doing amazing things with data and analytics at the tactical level. We're starting to see timelines for targeting and co-development decrease or capacity increase, and more confidence that operators have in the systems that they're using. That's what we're looking for.
Excellent. Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you. Okay, we're going to open up for Q&A. And we've got one right there. Please state your name and affiliation. It should be on, yes.
Okay. I'm usually the first question, right? Carmen has to come out and turn the microphone on. My first rodeo. Hi, I'm Peter Whitehead. I'm a senior engineer here at RAND. And wow, I have at least 10 questions, but in the interest of being generous to my colleagues, I'll try to keep it down to one. But first, a plug that we are working on metrics for large language models. We have a little internally funded effort on that. So just so you know. Yeah. Absorptive capacity is a big issue. And you touched on industry government partnerships. And of course, it's always been an issue, especially even more so after the peace dividend in the 90s, outsourcing to CEDA contractors and so forth and so on. We've been fortunate at RAND to see some good examples of people that are working to counter that, like Army Software Factory, for example, developing organic capability within the military. If you would be so kind as to address your thoughts on that and how you see DoD growing and filling that technical gap.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the software factory piece is key. One of the things is we look at Jazzy II in particular, but also Advanta, like I said before, the pipeline and the process by which we develop and deploy software is still currently, for some reason, whack-a-mole came to mind, but it's very singular. There's one idea, there's one software capability, it goes through the ATO process, it gets deployed. Then there's a new idea, it's a new software capability. It might be on the same data, it has to go through the ATO process and get deployed. As we worked Jazzy II, we had to go through the ATO process for a couple of our things, and we're like, geez, this process stinks. And then we said, wait, we have this mission to be a demanding customer of the department when it comes to things that are getting in the way of rapid adoption. And so we've reached out to CIO. We actually hired our own authorizing official, Danny Holtzman from the Air Force, who's known for his innovative thinking in this space. We've stolen some DARPA program managers and are sharing them with the Assault Breaker 2 team that's really thought about software pipelines. Lots of really good guidance from the CIO on software development pipeline implementation plan that they came out with. We really hope to operationalize that. So as we make more data available through our data integration layer, through Advanta, there should be a requisite software pipeline that's associated with that. We think most of that may be kind of policy related. And then we can provide that kind of, if you meet these checks, you can deploy, your software factory can be used. And so it's not that we have to set up a separate one, but we can use the service software factories and say, hey, just go through that process, make sure you've got these parameters that come out and you can deploy inside of the Advanta or Jazzy II data environment. And so Not exactly sure how that's going to work out quite yet, but that's the vision, is to make sure we've got that rapid on-ramp so that all partners can come to the table and it's not just this kind of onesie twosie approach that we have now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, James, please.
Hi, James Rice, a technical analyst here at Rand. So two things on my mind. So first off, like in the private sector, we often would see like cornerstone data sets take on sort of disproportionate within the sort of importance of the organization. So like Google search logs, like if you work at Google, like you needed the search logs, right? So you're not going to go off and do your own thing. Like you have to play well with others because that's a dominant data set. So like, what do you guys see? Like which data sets are being used the most frequently in DoD? Which are the ones that like seem like they should be being used but aren't being used? Like, how do you guys think about like setting up your cornerstones that way? And then the second one is like, so I mean, private sector software development just doesn't look anything like DoD, right? Like we don't do ATO. Like if you look at like Microsoft's threat modeling process, it looks a lot more like what an attacker at NSA does in reverse than it does like anything like the ATO process, right? And the RMF reform was an attempt to make ATO more rational, and yet ended up as just another compliance checklist, even though it was sort of intended to get away from that model. So, what do you guys see as the biggest barriers to doing software development in a more, I guess I'm from the private sector, so effective way, quite frankly, but
No insult taken. Oh, excuse me. Hold on one second while I retrieve my microphone box. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, so we'll go backwards. So on the software side, Danny Holtzman is the one who I think was part of the original RMF design. And then now he says, no one actually uses it for risk management. It's just a checklist. We've got to rethink it. And so he's actually developed and put in place for multiple programs, a different way to think about risk management and software development that is much more effective, in your words, than maybe our current process. And we're looking at how to scale that. And so that's one piece in the software pipeline that I talked about before is the other one. Like, how do we change the dynamic of how we think about developing and deploying software? On the data sets, we have these gold tables inside of Advanta that allow developers to reach into those core data sets. I think Craig says 20% of data, responds to 80% of use cases. As you can imagine, Blue Force data is huge, used for just about everything, for readiness to, plans to, replans to execution operations. We see a lot of just status of like inventory status and flow, logistics flow, because logistics is the core of everything that DoD does and comes up time and time again. Lots of financial data across the board, as you can imagine, in types of decisions. Wish we could do a little bit more with health data. And we're really working through the privacy and regulations around health data, because it's critical to how we view readiness. And what we find is just having to work through the different, it's very easy to say like, how come we can't just get access to data? But it's like, what data, what part of data, how are we going to use it, what is it used for? And so I think on those data sets that have a little bit more policy structure around them. Same thing with no foreign data. It's very hard to just say, well, let's just throw that no foreign data in there. It's like, well, hold on a second. Like, do we have the right tagging? As we start to integrate data, thinking through like, have we actually structured it in a way where pieces can be parsed and reused by different customers? This is the whole data as a product kind of focus. The more we bring data as a product focus, I think we'll see more use of those data sets that are under restricted caveats. But things that aren't have been really helpful for the enterprise, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting thought with like, so one of the things allies and partners don't like is the idea that people would steal their data or data gets moved around. So the idea that there's data that you may not want to see the individual rows of, right, but that you want to do aggregate information about and ways you might enforce that in software mechanisms is actually, it's an interesting like sort of general problem that we solve here.
Come work it for us. No, sorry.
Maybe.
Good. Yeah, please.
I relentlessly recruit at every event.
Is that right?
My name is Mohammed Ahmadi. I have a question. My question is more on the explainability of these AI systems. As you know, it's a black box phenomenon. We really don't know what's happening inside that. And what's the DoD policy in regard to basically, do you want to rely on tech companies to basically help you to understand these systems, or you want to have organizations like RAND and these AI safety seems like a big issue. like probably we make one mistake and that's all. So then we know we'll blow up something and then there is no way to fix it. So how is that policy at the policy level? How you see that and what you're really going to do that for that?
Yeah. So I don't think we have a formal like DoD policy on how to think through it. Explainability, one of our really great experts talk to us about, it's not about explainability, it's more about justified confidence. We know, I mean, even the AI that we're using today, there's a percentage, the F score, a percentage associated with how well the algorithm performs. And it's never 100%. So there's always going to be some sort of risk. The question is, how does the operator understand that? And how do they interact with the algorithm in the context of their workflow? That's really why Project Maven was established, was to experiment with AI in the context of workflows. And we're going to have to, continue to do that with every single AI application, whether it's, from computer vision to LLMs to machine learning, whatever algorithms we use. So that's really the piece. We do think that there should be some set of things that AI developers do to be able to characterize that. Our office is really thinking around test and evaluation and what kind of tools might we either provide or ask industry to use or conduct that give us insight into that. And then again, how do we make sure operators have the ability to retrain algorithms as they're interacting? It's really a workforce question and a technical question kind of combined. Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, well, we'll go to the online questions here for a minute. If folks have other, feel free to stand up. Jazzy Gill from Breaking Defense asks, where is the CDAO and its efforts to develop department-wide AI acquisition guidance? And is there a timeline for when the acquisition policy will stand up?
Yeah. So judging from my response, we are not far along in providing department AI acquisition guidance, but I don't know if we necessarily need to. So there's the test and evaluation piece around development. That's not entirely acquisition. It could be. And I think we're trying to find that balance of, what degree is this, a core set of tools that we ask people to use? To what is it I hate to say checklist, but to what extent is it a set of criteria that developers inside of government or industry must meet in order to field AI, whether that's on the development or the T&E or OT, operational test and evaluation side. Without a doubt, we think that data rights and government data ownership based on the data decrees is absolutely key. What we've really been trying to wrestle with inside of CDAO is not to over-centralize, because the department is so diverse and distributed and so large that we want innovation to happen at the edge. And so we think we have some best practices, but not necessarily ready for blanket policy guidance quite yet. We also have our core acquisition vehicles that are designed to do best practices. Tradewind is the platform, really focused on kind of three things: increasing speed, enabling variety of industry partners to play, and just agility in how well the contract and the needs can meet both industry and the user, but not really on the path for a policy quite yet.
Excellent. Yeah. Good. And then Brandy Vincent asks a question: what are some of the next realistic operational military scenarios that future guide experiments will be aimed at applying AI to?
Yeah.
And I'd welcome even just a sense of kind of what are the current operational military scenarios you all are considering for guide. Indo-PACOM.
I mean, and you can imagine where that command's focus is. We support other COCOMs for guide as well. And there's really two aspects of guide, I'll say. One is on the decision-making of the COCOM commander and the Joint Task Force down to its components. So this kind of vertical, how do you think through from tracking to targeting to fires to BDA, and that flow across an immense number of targets in a short amount of time in a very hard and large theater. So that's one aspect of guide. The other one is, it's going to be a global fight. Whatever we do is not going to be contained to one specific area. And so the coordination across combatant commands and with the National Command Authority to bring in diplomatic and economic and information, the other elements of national power, is going to be key. And so GUIDE focuses on global information dominance. How do you actually get combatant commands to work across their theaters or functions, and with the Joint Staff and Secretary of Defense's office to make decisions. So logistics is a huge one. One of the things GUIDE facilitates is the ability of all of the J4s across multiple COCOMs to get together and say, okay, if these are the COAs that are being proposed, how do we globally source them? Do we have to move assets from one theater to another theater? Do we have to think about a different posture? Do we have to bring in non-kinetic capabilities to be able to, think through something? And we have tools where they can actually now virtually collaborate together in the same workspace at the same time, and be able to have conversations and do analyses with different tool sets, which is just incredible, having worked for the chairman and watched kind of the way data has been handled in the past. It's much more readily available, and the communication tools are much better. So
excellent. Good. All right, we have time for one more question. Okay. Mr. Tommy Ross, please close this out.
Hi, Mr. Tommy Ross. Hey, I'm with Alteryx. I was actually before that with the Navy, a little bit overlapping with you, I think. And my impression, I think you're absolutely right in terms of analytics, that most principals across the DoD have kind of bought in to data-driven decision-making. And I think the deputy's done a really good job of forcing data-driven conversations and things like the DMAG. My impression, though, was that the challenge was really, some of it was access to data. A lot of it was transparency of analytic methodologies, challenges there. You'd see, I saw Navy leaders, Marine Corps leaders walking into DMAGs or walking in particularly to meetings that were with other components, and hearing the data-driven analysis that supported the conversations around decisions that were trying to be made, and then walk out of those meetings and completely reject everything that was discussed in the meeting on the grounds that they didn't trust the analysis, right? Because the analytics were not transparent to everyone involved in the conversation. I'm curious, and that was mainly at the enterprise level, but I'm curious how much you see that dynamic, and if so, what's to be done about it?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to make a plug for the CAPE office, Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation, which I know is under a little bit of fire right now. It has been amazing, especially, coming from the Navy and having kind of, like I said, see this, kind of the dark side, make these decisions and not understand why they were so counter to maybe things that we thought internally. The transparency in the last year that I've been able to experience DoD management at this level, and the use of common analytic tools and the discussion between, especially CAPE and the services around, like, what tools are you using, and can we come up with a common baseline for how we evaluate future force design or how we think about different campaigns. They've created a common scenario that creates a baseline across the department, and then they've allowed innovative excursions according to what the department might need. And in each one of those, they're able to understand which parameters did you change and how did you make those decisions, and really be open to different ways of thinking, as we come together as a department. So I actually think that there's much more alignment. Maybe the disagreement's hidden at lower levels, but even when I was in the Navy, working for the vice chief at the time, lots of talk around partnership with CAPE to understand how we're coming at this. The camaraderie in the leadership is amazing. I mean, I just can't, there aren't these like knockdown, drag out disagreements. Everyone is really open to coming to the right decision and doing the right thing for the nation and for the taxpayers and how we invest funding. I think data and analytics has kind of leveled that baseline, because people are now able to see, well, where'd you pull that data from and what kind of tool are you using? And they're much more savvy about asking those types of questions as opposed to just, why does your PowerPoint slide say this or that? And so I think we've made a lot of progress there.
Excellent. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, look, there are a number of tremendous questions that came in online. Unfortunately, we won't have time for any more today, but I think it's evidence of the fact that this is an issue that you work on that a lot of people care deeply about. CDAO's mission is righteous. We're lucky to have you in government. Thanks for sharing some thoughts on how it's going, and we wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, thanks so much.